The fluorescent lights of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport buzzed overhead as Sarah Collins stood at the K-9 unit's private boarding entrance, her hand resting on Max's broad head. The Belgian Malinois sat perfectly still beside her, his amber eyes fixed on her face with that uncanny awareness that always made her feel like he could read her thoughts. "It's just 2 days, buddy," Sarah murmured, crouching down to his level. She ran her fingers through the thick fur at his neck, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Miami and back. You'll barely notice I'm gone." Max's ears twitched forward, and he let out a soft whine that tugged at something deep in her chest. In 6 years as partners, they'd never been separated for more than a few hours. Every shift, every call, every dangerous situation, they'd faced it together. The idea of being apart, even for a short vacation, felt fundamentally wrong. "Officer Collins," a young airport handler approached, clipboard in hand. His name tag read, "Kevin. We're ready to take Max to the climate-controlled cargo hold whenever you are. The vet's already administered the mild sedative, and he'll be monitored throughout the flight." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. She knew the procedure by heart. She'd reviewed it a dozen times, insisted on inspecting the cargo area herself, verified every safety protocol. Max would be fine. She'd even spoken with the head of cargo operations, a former military dog handler who understood exactly what K-9 partners meant to their handlers. He'd personally assured her that Max would receive constant monitoring, that the temperature would remain a comfortable 68 degrees, and that a staff member would check on him every 20 minutes. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two entirely different things. She unclipped Max's tactical leash and handed it to Kevin, then placed both hands on either side of Max's face, looking directly into those intelligent eyes. "I'll see you in Miami, partner. Be good." Max leaned forward and licked her cheek once, a rare display of affection he usually reserved for off-duty moments in her apartment. Then Kevin led him away, and Sarah watched until the black and tan form disappeared through the secured cargo entrance. Even after he was gone, she stood there for another moment, feeling oddly incomplete without the familiar weight of his leash in her hand, without the sound of his paws clicking on the floor beside her. Her chest felt hollow. Sarah took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and forced herself to turn away. She was being ridiculous. Max had flown before, twice actually, when they'd transported him for specialized training courses. He'd been fine both times. This was no different, except it felt different, because this time she wasn't on duty. This time she was supposed to be relaxing, disconnecting, being something other than Officer Sarah Collins of the Atlanta PD K-9 unit. She straightened her civilian clothes, dark jeans and a fitted navy blue jacket that concealed her off-duty weapon, and headed toward the main terminal. She was traveling light, a small carry-on with 2 days' worth of clothes, her badge tucked securely in her inner jacket pocket, and her Glock 19 properly documented and secured according to TSA regulations for law enforcement. For the first time in 3 months, she wasn't in uniform, wasn't on call, wasn't responding to radio dispatches or coordinating with tactical teams. She was just Sarah, going to visit her sister in Miami, like a normal person. The thought felt strange and unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's clothes. The security line moved slowly, giving her too much time to think. She watched the other travelers with the automatic assessment that came from 11 years in law enforcement. The nervous college kid probably flying for the first time, the businessman irritated by the wait, the family of 4 trying to wrangle 2 small children through the metal detector. No threats, no suspicious behavior. Just ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Nicole. "Flight on time, can't wait to see you. And please tell me you're actually going to relax this time. No work talk, no checking your email every 5 minutes. Just you, me, the beach and umbrella drinks." Sarah smiled despite herself and typed back, "Boarding soon, and yes, I promise, no work talk, Scout's honor." It was a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Being a cop wasn't just what Sarah did, it was who she was. Had been since she graduated from the academy at 22, fresh-faced and idealistic, convinced she could make a real difference. 11 years later, the idealism had been tempered by reality, but the core conviction remained. Every drug dealer arrested, every missing person found, every dangerous situation neutralized. It mattered. It had to matter, or what was the point of any of it? And with Max by her side these past 6 years, her success rate had skyrocketed. The Malinois had a nose that could detect narcotics hidden in walls, a tracking ability that had recovered 3 missing children, and an intimidation factor that often de-escalated situations before they turned violent. He'd also saved her life twice. Once taking down a suspect who'd drawn on her during a traffic stop, and once alerting her to a tripwire in a meth lab that would have sent them both sky high. Max wasn't just her partner. He was family. The only family, really, besides Nicole, who understood what Sarah did and why it consumed her. Her parents had never quite grasped why she'd chosen law enforcement over the medical school acceptance she'd turned down. Her ex-boyfriend had left after 2 years, unable to compete with a job that demanded everything and a dog who slept at the foot of her bed. Even some of her colleagues didn't fully understand the bond between canine handlers and their dogs, thought it was excessive, unprofessional, too emotional. They were wrong. The bond was everything. It was what made the partnership work. It was what kept both of them alive. "Boarding Group B, please approach the gate." The announcement crackled through the terminal speakers. Sarah checked her boarding pass, 10A, window seat, and joined the line. The flight to Miami was full, mostly tourists and business travelers based on the mix of floral shirts and laptop bags. She found her row midway through economy, stowed her carry-on in the overhead bin, and slid into the window seat. The worn fabric and cramped legroom were a far cry from first class, but she'd taken the cheapest ticket available. Cop salaries didn't stretch far, especially in Atlanta, and she'd been saving for a down payment on a small house with a yard where Max could run. A middle-aged woman in the middle seat smiled politely as she settled in with a thick paperback romance novel. "First time to Miami?" "Visiting family," Sarah replied with a small smile, hoping the brevity would discourage further conversation. She wasn't being rude. She was just exhausted. The past 6 weeks had been relentless, a multi-agency drug trafficking operation that had Max working 12-hour shifts, tracking shipments through Atlanta's industrial district. They'd made 17 arrests, seized over 200 pounds of cocaine, and dismantled a distribution network that spanned 3 states. It had been a massive success. The mayor had personally commended her unit. The local news had run a story featuring Max, calling him Atlanta's 4-legged hero. The DEA had requested her assistance on 2 additional cases. It had also been completely, utterly draining. The woman took the hint and returned to her novel. Sarah leaned her head against the window, watching the ground crew load luggage into the belly of the aircraft. Somewhere down there, Max was settling into his travel crate, the sedative beginning to take effect. She hated the idea of him being drugged, even mildly, but it was the safest way. A fully alert K9 in cargo could hurt himself trying to get out, especially during turbulence. The sedative would keep him calm, relaxed, almost sleepy. He'd wake up in Miami, and she'd be there waiting for him. The plane filled quickly. A businessman in an expensive suit took the aisle seat, immediately opening his laptop and putting in earbuds. Perfect. Sarah closed her eyes as the flight attendants began their safety demonstration, the familiar words washing over her without really registering. She'd heard it hundreds of times on dozens of flights for training courses, conferences, multi-jurisdictional operations. The exits, the oxygen masks, the flotation devices, all of it background noise. The engines roared to life with that distinctive whine of turbines spooling up. The plane taxied slowly toward the runway, joining the queue of aircraft waiting for clearance. Through the window, Sarah watched other planes take off and land in the intricate dance of one of the world's busiest airports. Hartsfield-Jackson never stopped, never slowed, a constant flow of humanity arriving and departing. And then it was their turn. The plane pivoted onto the runway, and Sarah felt that moment of anticipation as the engines surged to full power. The acceleration pressed her back into her seat as the aircraft hurtled down the runway, faster and faster, until that magical moment when the wheels left the ground and they were airborne. Atlanta's sprawling landscape fell away below them. The downtown skyline, the maze of highways, the green patches of parks, all shrinking into a patchwork quilt of civilization. They climbed through a layer of clouds, and suddenly everything was brilliant sunshine and endless blue sky. The plane banked gently, settling onto its course southeast toward the Florida coast. Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. They were airborne. Max was safe in cargo. 2 days in Miami with Nicole. Actual beach time, actual relaxation, actual time off, stretched ahead like a gift. When was the last time she'd taken a real vacation? 2 years ago. 3. She couldn't even remember. She let herself drift, not quite sleeping but not fully awake either, in that hazy space between consciousness and dreams. Images flickered through her mind, without order or logic. Max as a puppy, all oversized paws and enthusiasm during their first week of training together. The look on a mother's face when Max tracked her missing son to an abandoned warehouse. The weight of Max's head on her lap during late nights at the station when paperwork kept her there past midnight. The explosion of adrenaline when Max alerted on a suspect's vehicle and she knew they had another case solved. The memories blurred together, 6 years of partnership condensed into fragments of emotion and sensation, trust, loyalty, purpose, the things that made the long hours and constant danger worthwhile. The flight attendant's voice filtered through her drowsiness. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. You're now free to move about the cabin. We'll begin beverage service shortly. Flight time to Miami is approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. 2 hours. Sarah could sleep for 2 hours. She could let her guard down, let her mind rest. Let someone else be in charge for once. The pilots had this. She didn't need to be vigilant, didn't need to scan for threats, didn't need to be Officer Collins. She shifted in her seat, preparing to actually sleep. The past 6 weeks had averaged maybe 4 hours of sleep per night, fueled by coffee and determination. Her body was screaming for rest, her mind foggy with exhaustion. She pulled the complimentary airline blanket over her lap, thin and scratchy but better than nothing, adjusted the seat back slightly, and let her eyes close fully. The hum of the engines became white noise. The conversations around her faded into an indistinct murmur. The businessman's typing on his laptop became rhythmic, almost soothing. For the first time in weeks, Sarah Collins allowed herself to completely let go, trusting in the pilots, the plane, and the simple fact that for the next 2 hours, there was nothing for Officer Sarah Collins to do except rest. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing deep and even, her mind finally, blessedly quiet. She dreamed of running through an open field with Max at her side, both of them young and unburdened, the sun warm on her face and the world simple and uncomplicated. In the dream, Max barked joyfully and took off ahead of her, and Sarah laughed, really laughed, in a way she hadn't in years. The grass was impossibly green, the sky impossibly blue, and there were no criminals to chase, no drugs to find, no dangers to face, just her and Max running free. It was a good dream, a peaceful dream, the kind of dream that made waking up feel like a loss. It wouldn't last. Because somewhere in first class, 16 rows ahead of Sarah's window seat in row 10, a man named Reid sat hunched over a black backpack, his hands trembling as he stared at the digital display strapped to the outside. The display showed numbers, bright red numbers that glowed against the black fabric, numbers that were counting down. 04133, 04132, 04131. And in approximately 41 minutes and 31 seconds, everything on Flight 447 to Miami was going to change. Sarah was deep in that perfect kind of sleep, dreamless, weightless, restorative, when the voice shattered it. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking." The tone was wrong, Even through the fog of sleep, Sarah's instincts recognized it immediately. Not the smooth, confident cadence of routine announcements. This was tight, controlled, the voice of someone trying very hard to sound calm while decidedly not being calm. Her eyes snapped open. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention. If there are any off-duty law enforcement officers on board, please identify yourselves to the flight crew immediately. I repeat, we need any off-duty police officers, federal agents or military police to make themselves known to the cabin crew right now." The cabin erupted into nervous murmurs. The woman next to Sarah clutched her romance novel tighter, her knuckles white. The businessman in the aisle seat pulled out his earbuds, looking around with barely concealed alarm. Sarah was already moving. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, her body shifting automatically into the posture she'd carried for 11 years. Shoulders back, chin up, eyes alert. Her hand went to her jacket pocket, fingers closing around her badge wallet. "Excuse me," she said to the businessman, who scrambled out of his seat to let her pass. A flight attendant was hurrying down the aisle, a woman in her 40s, with short blonde hair and the kind of efficient demeanor that came from years of managing emergencies at altitude. Her name tag read Patricia. When she saw Sarah standing in the aisle, holding up her badge, relief flooded her face. "Thank God," Patricia breathed. "Are you law enforcement?" "Officer Sarah Collins, Atlanta PD, K9 unit," Sarah said, her voice low and steady. "What's the situation?" Patricia glanced around at the passengers, now openly staring, then leaned closer. "First class, male passenger, mid-40s, acting extremely erratic. He's been sweating profusely, hyperventilating, won't make eye contact, and..." She paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "He has a backpack with what looks like a timer attached to it." Ice ran through Sarah's veins, but her face remained perfectly calm. This was the moment her training kicked in, the moment when emotion became irrelevant and only procedure mattered. "Is he making threats?" "Not verbally, but he keeps looking at the timer and muttering something we can't make out. He refused to let us take the backpack for overhead storage, insisted on keeping it with him, and when Jennifer, she's the first-class attendant, tried to ask if he needed anything, he told her..." Patricia's voice cracked slightly. "He told her there was no turning back now." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, protocols, threat assessments. They were at 35,000 feet over what was likely Georgia or northern Florida by now. No way to land immediately, no backup, no bomb squad, no negotiators, just her training, and whatever this situation turned out to be. "Anyone else identify as law enforcement?" "Not yet. You're the first." "Okay. I need you to stay calm and keep the other passengers calm. No announcements, no panic. Tell the captain I'm coming forward. Is the air marshal on board?" Patricia shook her head. "Not on this flight. Of course not." Budget cuts had reduced air marshal coverage to a fraction of flights. The odds of having one when you actually needed one were slim. "All right, take me to first class. And Patricia," Sarah caught her arm gently, "I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. Whatever happens up there, follow my lead and keep everyone else back here." "Understand?" Patricia nodded, her professionalism overriding her fear. "Follow me." They moved through the cabin, Sarah acutely aware of every pair of eyes tracking her movement. She could feel the tension radiating from the passengers, that primal fear of being trapped in a metal tube 7 miles above the earth with no escape route. She kept her face neutral, her movements confident. Panic was contagious. So was calm. The first-class cabin was separated by a curtain. Patricia held it aside, and Sarah stepped through into a different world. Wider seats, more space, fewer passengers. And at the far end, near the cockpit door, a man sat hunched in seat 2A. Marcus Reid. Even from 15 feet away, Sarah could see the signs. The man was falling apart. His dress shirt was soaked through with sweat, despite the cabin's cool temperature. His hands gripped a black backpack so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His leg bounced rapidly, that nervous energy of someone on the edge. And yes, there it was. Strapped to the outside of the backpack, a digital display showing red numbers. 0.27 to 15, 0 to 27 to 14, 0 to 27 to 13. A countdown. Sarah's heart rate accelerated, but her breathing remained steady. This was either a bomb or someone who wanted people to think it was a bomb. Either way, the threat was real. She'd seen enough domestic terrorism briefings, enough post-9/11 security protocols to know that every second mattered. Another flight attendant, Jennifer presumably, stood near the galley, her face pale. Sarah caught her eye and gave a small, reassuring nod, then turned her full attention to Marcus Reid. She approached slowly, deliberately, her hands visible and non-threatening, every movement calculated. This was no different than approaching a suspect with a weapon, except the weapon might be capable of bringing down the entire aircraft. "Sir?" Sarah kept her voice gentle, almost conversational. "My name is Sarah. I'm with the Atlanta Police Department. Can we talk?" Marcus didn't look up. He continued staring at the timer, his lips moving in what might have been counting or prayer. "Sir, I'd like to help you, but I need you to talk to me. Can you do that?" Still nothing. Sarah moved one seat closer, now in the row directly behind him. She could see the details now, the expensive backpack, the professional way the timer had been attached, the slight tremor in Marcus's entire body. This wasn't some kid making a stupid threat. This was a man who'd planned something, prepared something, committed to something. "Marcus," she said, using his name. Patricia must have gotten it from the passenger manifest. "Marcus Reid. That's you, right?" The use of his name got a reaction. His head lifted slightly, though his eyes remained fixed on the backpack. "I know you're scared," Sarah continued, sliding into the seat across the aisle from him. Close enough to talk quietly, far enough to give him space. "Whatever's happening, whatever brought you here, I know it feels overwhelming, but I promise you we can work through this. I just need you to talk to me. You can't help." Marcus's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Nobody can help. It's too late." "It's not too late. Not if we talk right now. Not if you tell me what's going on. You don't understand." His hands tightened on the backpack. "I have to do this. I have to make them see." "Make who see? Make them see what?" Sarah's mind worked through the implications. Political extremism, revenge, mental health crisis. The motivations mattered because they determine how to de-escalate. "Make who see, Marcus? Who are you trying to reach?" He finally looked at her, and Sarah saw something that made her reassess everything. His eyes weren't cold or fanatical. They were devastated. This wasn't the face of an ideologue or a terrorist. This was the face of a man in absolute agony. "The people who killed my daughter," Marcus whispered. Sarah felt the situation shift. Not a terrorist. A father. A grieving, broken father who'd reached the end of some terrible road and decided the only way forward was through destruction. "Tell me about your daughter," Sarah said softly. "Emma." Her name was Emma. Tears tracked down Marcus's face, cutting through the sweat. "She was 7 years old. She loved butterflies. She wanted to be a veterinarian." His voice broke. "And they killed her." "Who killed her, Marcus?" "Nexus Pharmaceuticals." The words came out like venom. "Their drug. Their negligence. Their lies. Emma had a heart condition, nothing serious, manageable with the right medication. But Nexus released their new drug without proper testing, falsified the clinical trials, and my baby girl, my perfect little girl." He couldn't continue for a moment, overcome by grief so raw it was painful to witness. Sarah kept her voice steady, compassionate. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. Losing a child. There's no pain like it. But whatever you're planning, whatever's in that backpack, it won't bring Emma back." "I know." Marcus looked at her with hollow eyes. "But it'll make them pay attention. It'll make them admit what they did. The courts won't listen. The lawyers buried the evidence. The FDA investigation went nowhere because Nexus has politicians in their pocket. But this," he gestured to the backpack, "this they can't ignore." "What's in the bag, Marcus?" He laughed, a broken sound. "The truth. Every document, every email, every piece of evidence showing what Nexus did. I've spent 2 years compiling it, 2 years of my life consumed by making sure Emma's death meant something. Sarah's mind raced. Documents, not a bomb. And the timer? Time since she died. Marcus's voice cracked. 731 days, 14 hours and... He glanced at the display. 26 minutes. I set it the moment she took her last breath. I've carried it every day since. A reminder that every second that passes, they're still free, still making their drugs, still lying. Relief flooded through Sarah, though she kept it hidden. Not a bomb, not a terrorist, just a father destroyed by grief and failure, making one last desperate attempt to be heard. But the flight crew didn't know that. The passengers didn't know that. And Marcus's behavior, the sweating, the muttering, the refusal to be separated from the backpack, had created a crisis regardless of his actual intentions. Marcus, I believe you. I believe Emma's death matters. I believe you deserve justice. But this, bringing a timer onto a plane, acting in a way that terrifies everyone around you, this isn't the way to get that justice. Then what is? Marcus demanded, suddenly angry. I've tried everything legal, everything proper, and nothing worked. Emma's name appears in exactly 3 news articles. 3, as if she didn't matter, as if her death was just an unfortunate statistic. Well, I'm done being quiet. I'm done following the rules that protect corporations while children die. I understand your anger. Do you? Marcus's voice rose. Do you have a daughter? Do you know what it's like to watch your child slip away while doctors tell you there's nothing they can do? To hold her hand while her heart fails? To promise her it'll be okay when you know it won't? The other first-class passengers were openly staring now, some starting to look panicked. Sarah needed to bring this down, de-escalate before Marcus's emotional state affected everyone else's. No, Sarah said quietly. I don't have children, but I have Max. Marcus blinked, confused by the non sequitur. What? Max, my K9 partner. He's a Belgian Malinois, and he's down in cargo right now, sedated for the flight. I've worked with him for 6 years. He's saved my life twice. He's the best thing in my world, and if anything happened to him, if someone's negligence or lies hurt him, I'd want to burn down everything too. Marcus was listening now, really listening. But Marcus, Max depends on me to make good decisions, to be the rational one when he can't be. And Emma, Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. Emma would want you to get justice the right way, not like this. Not in a way that destroys what's left of you. There's nothing left of me to destroy. Marcus's anger deflated into exhaustion. I'm already gone. I died with Emma. I'm just still moving. Then move towards something that matters. Let me help you. Give me the evidence. Let me make sure the right people see it. People who can actually do something. Atlanta PD works with federal investigators all the time. If Nexus broke laws, if they falsified trials, there are people who will care, people who can make them pay. You're just saying that. I'm not. Marcus, I'm a cop because I believe in justice, real justice. And what happened to Emma, if it's what you say it is, that demands justice, but not this way. Not with you destroying yourself on a plane full of innocent people who are terrified right now because they think you're going to kill them. Marcus looked around, seeming to truly see the other passengers for the first time, the elderly couple clutching each other. The young mother with a toddler, tears streaming down her face, the businessman trying to look brave and failing. I never meant, Marcus started. I'm not a terrorist, I'm just a father. I know, but they don't know that. So let's fix this. Let's end this fear. Give me the backpack. Talk to me, and I swear to you, Marcus Reid, I will make sure Emma's story gets told. The cabin was silent except for the engine hum. Marcus stared at the timer. Urdu 24 to 17, June 24 to 16, Rud 24, 15. If I give you this, Marcus said slowly, if I trust you and you're lying, if nothing happens, if Emma's death continues to mean nothing, I won't get another chance. You have my word, Sarah said, and a cop's word is everything. Marcus sat frozen for another long moment. Then, slowly, his hands relaxed their death grip on the backpack. He looked at Sarah with eyes that held the faintest spark of something that might have been hope. Her favorite butterfly was the monarch, he whispered. She said they were magic because they could fly thousands of miles to find home. She sounds like she was amazing, Sarah said gently. She was everything. And with shaking hands, Marcus Reid lifted the backpack and held it out to Sarah Collins. The moment she took it, the entire first-class cabin seemed to exhale. Sarah held the backpack carefully, as if it might still contain something dangerous despite Marcus's explanation. The weight of it was substantial, easily 20 pounds of documentation, she estimated. The timer continued its relentless countdown, a physical manifestation of Marcus's grief measured in seconds, minutes, hours, days. 0:23:47, 0:23:46, 0:23:45. "Patricia!" Sarah called to the flight attendant, who'd been standing near the galley with Jennifer, both watching the situation with barely controlled anxiety. "I need you to inform the captain that the immediate threat has been neutralized. The passenger is cooperative, and the item in question contains documents, not explosives." Patricia nodded and moved quickly toward the cockpit, her relief palpable. Jennifer remained, her professional training warring with obvious fear. Sarah turned back to Marcus, who sat slumped in his seat, looking smaller somehow, now that he'd relinquished the backpack. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by a hollow exhaustion that was almost harder to witness than his earlier desperation. "Marcus, I need you to stay calm and cooperate fully. We're going to get through this, but you have to trust the process. Understand?" He nodded without looking up. "Good. Now, I need you to answer some questions honestly. Is there anything else in your possession that could be construed as a weapon or threat? Anything at all?" "No. Just the documents. Just Emma's truth." Sarah believed him, but she had to verify. "I'm going to need to check. It's procedure." "May I?" Marcus spread his arms slightly in acquiescence. Sarah conducted a quick but thorough pat-down. Nothing but a wallet, phone, and a small photo album in his jacket pocket. She could guess what the album contained without opening it. "Thank you for cooperating," Sarah said, stepping back. She caught Jennifer's eye. "Can you bring Mr. Reid some water, please? And maybe a cool cloth for his face." Jennifer moved immediately, grateful for a concrete task. Sarah sat down across from Marcus, the backpack now resting on the seat beside her. The other first-class passengers were watching with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. Sarah addressed them directly, her voice calm and authoritative. "Folks, the situation is under control. There is no threat to this aircraft or anyone on board. I know you're shaken, and that's completely understandable, but I need you to remain calm and seated. We'll be landing in Miami on schedule." But an elderly man in seat 4B spoke up, his voice trembling. "What about him? What about what he did? He terrorized all of us." Sarah chose her words carefully. "Sir, I understand your fear and anger. What I can tell you is that Mr. Reid is grieving the loss of his daughter and made some very poor decisions today, but he was never a threat to anyone's safety. He's cooperating fully, and the appropriate authorities will handle the matter when we land." "Their poor decisions." A woman in seat 3A stood up, her face flushed with anger and residual terror. "He brought a timer onto a plane. He made us all think we were going to die. That's more than a poor decision." "Ma'am, I need you to sit down, please." Sarah's voice remained steady but firm. "I know you're upset. You have every right to be, but right now, I need everyone to stay calm so we can get this plane safely to Miami. Once we land, you'll have the opportunity to give statements to the FBI. But right now, please, sit down." The woman sat, though her glare could have melted steel. Sarah couldn't blame her. These people had just experienced their worst nightmare, trapped on a plane with what they believed was a bomber. The fact that Marcus's intentions had been misunderstood didn't erase their trauma. Jennifer returned with water and a damp cloth. Marcus took them with shaking hands, pressing the cloth to his face. The water glass rattled against his teeth when he drank. Patricia emerged from the cockpit. "Officer Collins, the captain would like to speak with you." Sarah nodded, then looked at Jennifer. "Stay with Mr. Reid. If he needs anything or if there are any problems, get me immediately. Don't leave him alone with other passengers." She made her way to the cockpit door, which opened after she identified herself. The flight deck was a compact space dominated by instruments and the panoramic view of endless sky. Captain Reynolds, a silver-haired man in his 50s, turned in his seat to face her, while his first officer, a younger woman named Chen, according to her name badge, continued monitoring the controls. "Officer Collins," Reynolds said, relief evident in his voice. "Patricia said you've contained the situation." "Yes, sir. The passenger, Marcus Reid, is not a terrorist. He's a grieving father carrying documentation related to his daughter's death. The timer on his backpack is a memorial device, not a detonator. There are no explosives, no weapons, no actual threat to the aircraft." Reynolds exhaled slowly. "Thank God. We were prepared to declare an emergency and divert to Jacksonville. That won't be necessary. Reid is cooperative and remorseful. He didn't intend to create a threat. He's just a man who's lost everything and wasn't thinking clearly." First Officer Chen spoke without taking her eyes off the instruments. "What about the other passengers? Are they calm?" "For now. Shaken, understandably, and some are angry. But I've assured them the situation is resolved." Reynolds nodded. "We'll need to notify Miami ATC and have law enforcement meet us at the gate. FBI will want to interview everyone, including you." "I expected that. I'll need to file a full report." "Udi, can I ask?" Reynolds hesitated. "How did you get him to stand down? In my 20 years flying, I've never had to deal with anything like this." Sarah thought about Marcus's devastated face, the way his hands had trembled when he handed over the backpack, the absolute emptiness in his eyes when he talked about Emma. "I listened," she said simply. "Sometimes that's all people need, someone to hear them." "Well, whatever you did, you probably saved lives today." If he'd panicked, if things had escalated, Reynolds didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. "Just doing my job, Captain." "Your job is K9 work in Atlanta, isn't it? You're not even on duty." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Being a cop isn't something you clock out of, sir. It's who you are. The world needs more officers like you, Collins." Sarah returned to the cabin, where an uneasy peace had settled. Marcus sat exactly where she'd left him, staring at nothing. The other passengers were pretending to read, watch movies, sleep, anything to avoid acknowledging what had just happened. She sat down near Marcus, but not next to him, giving him space while remaining close enough to intervene if needed. The backpack rested on her lap now, its weight both literal and metaphorical. Inside this bag was a father's obsessive quest for justice, 2 years of investigation condensed into paper and digital files. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, "tell me about the evidence. What exactly did you compile?" He looked at her with dull eyes. "Everything. Internal Nexus emails showing they knew about the cardiac risks, testimony from whistleblower scientists who were fired for raising concerns, clinical trial data that was falsified, names of FDA officials who received consulting fees from Nexus, financial records showing where the money went. And his voice dropped. A list of 47 other children who died from the same drug. 47, and their families were paid off or intimidated into silence." Sarah felt her professional detachment waver. If what Marcus claimed was true, this wasn't just corporate negligence. It was systematic criminal conspiracy resulting in the deaths of children. "You investigated all of this yourself?" "I had help. There's a journalist in Boston, Karen Mitchell, who's been trying to break this story for a year, but every time she gets close, Nexus's legal team shuts it down, threatens lawsuits, pressures her editors. She gave me copies of everything she had, said if something happened to her, at least the information would survive. And you were taking this to Miami because Miami Herald has an investigative team that's bulletproof. They broke the Jeffrey Epstein case when everyone else was afraid to touch it. Karen set up a meeting with their lead investigator. I was supposed to hand-deliver the evidence." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I thought if I could just get it into the right hands, if I could just make someone with power care, then Emma's death would mean something, but I couldn't sleep last night." Kept thinking about that meeting, about how many times I've been disappointed, how many doors have been slammed in my face. And I set the timer as my phone background. And this morning at the airport I realized, if I died on this flight, the evidence would die with me. So I strapped the timer to the outside of the bag, thought if something happened, at least someone would investigate, would find what I was carrying. Sarah understood now. Marcus hadn't been trying to threaten anyone. He'd been trying to protect his evidence, to make it visible, to ensure that even in death, Emma's story would be told. But his trauma-addled thinking hadn't considered how it would be perceived. Marcus, that decision almost got you killed. If we'd had an air marshal on board, if someone had panicked and tried to be a hero, if I'd been less willing to talk, you understand that, right? I know. I don't. He struggled for words. I don't think clearly anymore. Haven't since Emma. It's like I'm watching myself from far away, and the person I'm watching does stupid, desperate things, and I can't stop him. You need help, professional help, grief counseling, therapy. What you're experiencing isn't weakness, it's a normal response to unbearable trauma. But you can't heal if you're stuck in this loop of investigation and anger. How do I heal when they're still out there, still selling that drug, still getting away with murder? You heal by letting other people carry the weight for a while. You've done your part, Marcus. You've compiled the evidence. You've fought for Emma. Now let me help you get that evidence to people who can use it properly. Let the system work. The system failed Emma. Sometimes it does. Systems are imperfect because they're run by imperfect people. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we work harder to fix the flaws. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, will you really help? Or are you just saying what I need to hear to keep me calm until we land and I get arrested? Sarah met his eyes directly. Marcus Reid, I give you my word as a police officer and as someone who understands what it means to love someone more than your own life. I will personally ensure that this evidence gets to the people who can act on it. I'll connect you with federal investigators, with journalists who can't be silenced, with anyone who can help bring Nexus to justice. But you have to help yourself too. You have to accept that you need support. And if I agree to all that, what happens when we land? Honestly, you'll be detained, probably arrested, at least initially. Your behavior on this flight, regardless of your intentions, violated federal law. But Sarah held up a hand as despair flooded Marcus's face. But intent matters. Circumstances matter. The fact that you cooperated, that you were never actually a threat, that you're clearly suffering from a mental health crisis related to grief, all of that will be taken into account. With the right legal representation, you might avoid serious jail time, community service, mandatory counseling, probation. Those are all possible outcomes. I don't care about jail, Marcus said. I care about Emma's story being told. Then trust me to make that happen. Down below them, somewhere in the climate-controlled cargo hold, Max stirred slightly in his crate. The sedative was mild enough that it wouldn't keep him completely unconscious for the entire flight. Sarah had arranged it that way deliberately. She never wanted Max fully incapacitated unless absolutely necessary. Even sedated, he could sense his surroundings, could feel the vibrations and sounds of the aircraft. And right now, something was making him restless. Some instinct, some connection to Sarah that transcended physical proximity. He couldn't smell her, couldn't see her, couldn't hear her. But he knew, in the way dogs know things beyond human comprehension, that something was wrong with his partner. Max's eyes opened slowly, amber and alert, despite the drug in his system. He tried to stand in the crate and found his legs uncooperative. A soft whine escaped his throat, frustration and concern combined. In the passenger cabin above, Sarah felt an odd sensation, like a tug on an invisible thread. She touched her chest unconsciously, that spot where she sometimes felt Max's presence even when they were apart. It was the bond, the connection that made K9 teams so effective, partners in the truest sense. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked, noticing her distraction. "Yes, just my dog. He's in cargo. I sometimes feel when he's anxious." Marcus managed a weak smile. Emma used to say animals have a sixth sense, that they know things we don't. Emma was right. The plane continued its journey toward Miami, cutting through air so thin a human couldn't survive in it unprotected, carrying its cargo of frightened passengers, one grieving father, one off-duty cop, and one increasingly alert Belgian Malinois who knew his human needed him. Patricia approached Sarah quietly. "Officer Collins, the captain asked me to tell you we're about 45 minutes from Miami. He's been in contact with authorities. There will be FBI, Miami-Dade Police, and ATF waiting at the gate." "Understood. Thank you, Patricia. Also, some of the passengers in economy are asking questions. Should I tell them anything?" Sarah considered. "Tell them the situation has been resolved, and there's no danger. Nothing more. The less said, the better, until everyone's been properly debriefed." Patricia nodded and moved away. Sarah looked at Marcus, who'd been listening. 45 minutes, he said. "Then it's over." "No," Sarah corrected gently. "Then it begins. The real work of getting justice for Emma starts when we land. Everything up to now has just been survival. I'm not sure I know how to do anything but survive anymore. Then it's time to learn. And Marcus," Sarah waited until he looked at her. "Emma would want you to learn. She'd want her father to live, not just survive. Can you try to do that? For her?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "I can try. That's all anyone can ask." The plane flew on through the brilliant afternoon sky, carrying its fragile cargo of humanity toward whatever came next. Sarah kept the backpack close, Marcus's life's work compressed into portable form. 47 children, he'd said, 47 families destroyed. If even half of what he claimed could be proven, Nexus Pharmaceuticals would face legal devastation. And Sarah Collins, off-duty K9 officer from Atlanta who'd only wanted a quiet flight to visit her sister, would make sure that happened. Because some promises once made were unbreakable, just like some bonds once formed could never be severed. Even at 35,000 feet with no way out, even in the midst of crisis and fear and the wreckage of a father's grief, those bonds held. Sarah touched her chest again, feeling that invisible thread that connected her to Max. "Hold on, partner," she thought. "Almost there. Almost home." In the cargo hold, Max's ears perked up, as if he'd heard her across the impossible distance. The final 30 minutes of the flight passed in a strange, suspended tension. Sarah remained near Marcus, who'd retreated into himself, staring out the window as Florida's coastline came into view below. The backpack sat between them like a third presence, the timer still counting relentlessly. 17:23, 17:22, 17:21. Sarah had photographed the timer's display with her phone, documented the backpack's contents through the mesh exterior pocket. She could see the edges of file folders, USB drives, a laptop, evidence that Marcus claimed would bring down a pharmaceutical giant. Evidence that might vindicate his daughter's death, or might be the desperate compilations of a grief-stricken father seeing conspiracies where there were only tragedies. Either way, it deserved investigation. Jennifer had brought coffee, terrible airplane coffee, but Sarah accepted it gratefully. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the crisis was beginning to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She checked her watch. Another 25 minutes until landing. Then the real complexity would begin. "Officer Collins?" Patricia appeared beside her, voice low. "We have a situation in economy." Sarah's guard went back up immediately. "What kind of situation?" "Passenger in row 10, where you were sitting. She's having what looks like a panic attack. Won't stop crying, hyperventilating. We've tried to calm her, but she keeps saying she thought she was going to die, that she has 2 kids at home, that she can't breathe." The woman in the middle seat, the one with the romance novel who'd been sitting next to Sarah when the captain made his announcement. "I'll come back," Sarah said, standing. She looked at Marcus. "Stay here. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Jennifer will stay with you. Understood?" Marcus nodded mutely. Sarah followed Patricia through the curtain into economy, where the atmosphere was markedly different from first class. Word had spread, as it always did on flights, that something serious had happened up front. Passengers were whispering, checking their phones, despite having no signal, casting nervous glances toward the front of the plane. Row 10. The woman was exactly as Patricia had described, sobbing, gasping for air, her face blotchy and red. The businessman who'd been in the aisle seat had moved, leaving the space for Sarah to sit. "Hey," Sarah said softly, sliding into the seat. "I'm Sarah. Remember me? I was sitting right here." The woman looked at her with wild eyes. "We almost died. We almost died, and I couldn't, my boys. What's your name?" "Linda. Linda Morrison." "Okay, Linda, listen to me. You're safe. Everyone on this plane is safe. I need you to breathe with me. Can you do that? In through your nose, out through your mouth. Like this," Sarah demonstrated, making her breathing deliberately audible. Linda tried to match it, but her breath kept hitching. "That's okay. You're doing fine. Let's try again. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold. Out. 2, 3, 4. You're doing great, Linda." It took several minutes, but gradually Linda's breathing began to stabilize. Her death grip on the armrests loosened slightly. "My boys," Linda whispered. "Tyler and Jake. They're 8 and 6. If something had happened, if that man had... But he didn't, and nothing happened. You're going to land in Miami, and you're going to call your boys, and they're going to be so excited to hear from you." "Was it really not a bomb?" "Everyone's saying it was a bomb." Sarah chose her words carefully. The passenger in first class was carrying something that looked concerning, but it was never a bomb. He was never actually a threat to anyone's safety. He's a father who lost his child and made some very poor decisions while dealing with his grief. So we were scared for nothing. Your fear was real and valid, Linda. You didn't know what was happening. Fear in a situation like that is completely normal. But I promise you, there was never any actual danger to this aircraft. Linda wiped her eyes with a tissue Patricia had provided. "I've never been so scared in my life. When the captain made that announcement, when you got up, I knew something was wrong, really wrong. And I just kept thinking about Tyler and Jake not having a mother. They still have their mother. You're right here, and you're going to be fine." "Are you really a cop?" "Atlanta PD, K9 unit, 11 years. "Do you have kids?" "No, but I have Max, my K9 partner. He's like my kid in a lot of ways." "Is he on the plane?" "Down in cargo, probably wondering what's taking so long." Linda managed a small smile. "What kind of dog?" "Belgian Malinois. He's probably the best thing in my life, if I'm being honest. My boys want a dog so badly. I keep saying maybe next year when they're older." "Get the dog," Sarah said with certainty. "Dogs teach kids things that nothing else can. Responsibility, empathy, unconditional love. Your boys will remember that dog for the rest of their lives." Linda nodded, her breathing now almost normal. "Thank you for talking to me, for helping, for everything. Just doing my job." Sarah stood, patting Linda's shoulder. "You're going to be okay. We'll be landing soon, and then you can put this whole thing behind you." As Sarah made her way back to first class, she passed other passengers who looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. A few nodded or murmured thanks. One man stopped her. "Officer, I just want to say, whatever you did up there, thank you. My wife and I were in first class. We saw what happened. The way you talked that man down, that was incredible. I appreciate that, sir." "Are you Atlanta PD?" "My brother's a cop in Marietta. Clayton Morrison. You might know him." "I've met Officer Morrison. Good man. Tell him Mark says hello when you see him." "I will." Back in first class, Marcus hadn't moved. He looked like a man waiting for execution, which in some ways he was. Whatever happened when they landed, his life as he'd known it was over. Best case scenario, he'd face minimal legal consequences, but would still be marked forever as the man who caused a panic on a commercial flight. Worst case, well, federal charges for interfering with a flight crew could carry serious prison time. Sarah settled back into her seat. The plane had begun its descent. She could feel the change in cabin pressure. hear the subtle adjustment in engine noise. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I need to know something, and I need complete honesty. When you got on this plane, what were you thinking would happen? What was your plan?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I don't know if I had a plan. I was operating on autopilot. Get to Miami, meet with the Herald investigator, hand over the evidence. Maybe finally someone would listen, someone would care. And the timer on the outside of the bag. I told you, I wanted it visible. If the plane went down, if something happened to me, I wanted investigators to wonder what it meant. Wanted them to open the bag and find Emma's story." "So you weren't trying to scare people?" "No, God, no. I didn't think—" Marcus's voice broke. "I didn't think about how it would look. I was so focused on protecting the evidence, on making sure it survived even if I didn't, that I couldn't see how insane it appeared. I couldn't see myself from the outside anymore." "That's what trauma does," Sarah said. "It narrows your vision until all you can see is your pain and your mission. Everything else becomes invisible." "How do you know so much about trauma?" "I'm a cop. I see trauma every day. Victims, witnesses, suspects, everyone's carrying something. And we get training on it, on how to recognize when someone's in crisis, when their judgment is impaired by emotional overload. So you knew I wasn't really a terrorist. I knew you were in pain. That was obvious from the moment I saw your face. Whether you were dangerous, that took more assessment. But once you started talking about Emma, once I saw that grief, I knew we could work through this." Now Marcus looked at her with something like wonder. "You're very good at your job. I have good instincts, and a good partner who taught me that communication matters more than force." Max, Sarah confirmed. "He can't use words, obviously, but he's incredibly expressive. He's taught me to read body language, to pick up on subtle cues, to understand what someone's really communicating beyond what they're saying. I'd like to meet him someday, if I'm not in prison. Let's focus on one step at a time." The plane dropped lower, and through the windows, Miami sprawled below them, beaches and buildings, highways and harbors, all bathed in afternoon sunshine. So different from Atlanta's landlocked sprawl. Sarah could see the airport in the distance, runways stretching out like concrete ribbons. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach into Miami International Airport. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing." Patricia and Jennifer moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts, raising tray tables, returning seats to upright positions. The familiar ritual of arrival. Most passengers probably loved this moment, the anticipation of reaching their destination, of stepping out into a new place or returning home. For Marcus, it meant the end. For Sarah, it meant complicated explanations and hours of paperwork. For Max, it meant finally being reunited with his partner. Sarah found herself thinking about that reunion, about the moment when she'd see Max again. Would he be groggy from the sedative, excited and bouncing? Or would he sense something had happened, pick up on the residual stress and adrenaline? Probably the latter. Max always knew. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical whir and thunk. The plane descended through the final 1,000 feet, the ground rushing up to meet them. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of deceleration, the pilot bleeding off speed, adjusting angle, and then the gentle bump of wheels touching tarmac. They were down. Passengers applauded, something that always happened after a difficult flight or rough weather, but this time it felt more significant. Relief that they'd made it, that whatever crisis had occurred hadn't ended in disaster. Marcus didn't applaud. He sat frozen, watching through the window as the plane taxied toward the terminal. "You'll see them, won't you?" Marcus said suddenly. "The vehicles, the agents. They'll board before anyone else is allowed off." "Yes, that's protocol." "Will they handcuff me?" Sarah considered lying, but he deserved honesty. "Probably, yes. It's standard procedure in a situation like this. They don't know you're cooperative. They only know there was a threat on the plane. They'll secure you first. Ask questions later." "I understand." Marcus took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Emma always said I was brave. She'd say it when I had to give her shots for her condition, or when she was scared at night and I'd check under the bed for monsters. You're the bravest daddy in the world, she'd say. His voice cracked. I have to be brave now. For her. You're already brave, Marcus. Making it this far, surviving what you've survived, that takes incredible courage. The plane stopped at the gate, but the seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Through the window, Sarah could see them, multiple police vehicles, FBI vans, unmarked cars, probably 20 agents or officers, all converging on the plane. Last thing before they board, Sarah said urgently. The journalist in Boston, Karen Mitchell. I need her contact information and the name of the Miami Herald investigator you were supposed to meet. Marcus rattled off a phone number and email for Karen Mitchell and the name Daniel Rodriguez for the Herald. Sarah entered them into her phone. I will follow up on this, Marcus. You have my word. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me as a person instead of a threat. For listening about Emma. For... He couldn't finish. The cockpit door opened and Captain Reynolds emerged, followed by 2 FBI agents in tactical gear. They moved with practiced efficiency, weapons drawn but lowered, scanning the cabin. Marcus Reid, the lead agent called out. Marcus stood slowly, hands raised. That's me. Sir, I need you to turn around, place your hands on the headrest in front of you, and spread your feet. Marcus complied without resistance. The agents cuffed him quickly, professionally, reading him his rights in a steady monotone. Sarah watched, her heart heavy. This was justice, she knew, due process, but it still felt wrong somehow to see a grieving father treated like a criminal. Officer Collins? The second agent addressed her. I'm Special Agent Williams, FBI. Can you come with me, please? We need your statement. Of course, but first, Sarah held up the backpack. This contains evidence related to pharmaceutical fraud and possibly criminal negligence resulting in multiple deaths. It needs to be documented and secured as evidence. Chain of custody starts now. Williams took the bag, his eyebrows raising at its weight. What kind of evidence? Documentation of corporate malfeasance by Nexus Pharmaceuticals. Mr. Reid has been investigating his daughter's death for 2 years. If his claims are substantiated, this could be a major federal case. We'll look into it. Do more than look into it, Agent Williams. Get it to your white-collar crime division and contact a journalist named Karen Mitchell in Boston. She's been working this story independently. Williams studied her. You believe him? Believe this is legitimate? I believe he's telling the truth as he understands it. Whether that truth holds up under investigation, that's your job to determine. But his daughter is dead, and someone needs to find out why. Noted. Now, if you'll come with me. Sarah glanced back at Marcus, who was being escorted off the plane by 2 other agents. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she saw gratitude there, mixed with resignation and fear, and that bottomless grief that had driven him to this point. She nodded once. A promise kept. Then she followed Agent Williams off the plane into the organized chaos of a federal investigation, ready to tell her story and make sure Emma's story didn't get lost in the process. Behind her, in the cargo hold, Max was already being released from his crate by a handler who'd been briefed on the situation. The sedative had worn off enough that he was alert, scanning for threats, searching for Sarah. Their reunion was moments away, and for the first time since the captain's announcement had shattered her sleep, Sarah Collins allowed herself to smile. The Miami International Airport terminal buzzed with its typical chaos. Announcements in English and Spanish, the rumble of luggage wheels, the constant flow of humanity arriving and departing. But in the secured area where Sarah stood giving her statement to Special Agent Williams, everything felt muted, distant, as if she were watching the world through thick glass. She'd been talking for 40 minutes straight, recounting every detail from the moment she'd heard Captain Reynolds's announcement to the moment Marcus had been escorted off the plane in handcuffs. Williams recorded everything on a digital device, occasionally stopping her to clarify a point or ask for more specificity. And you felt confident that Reid posed no actual threat? Williams asked for the third time, approaching the question from a different angle. Yes. His body language, his emotional state, his responses to my questions, everything pointed to a man in severe psychological distress, not someone planning violence. The timer wasn't a detonator, it was a memorial. The backpack wasn't a weapon, it was a filing cabinet. But you couldn't have known that for certain when you first approached him. No, which is why I proceeded cautiously, assessed continuously, and maintained a position where I could respond if the threat assessment changed. But within 5 minutes of conversation, it was clear Reid was suicidal ideation, not homicidal. Williams made a note. Suicidal. A man who says, "There's nothing left of me to destroy, and I died with Emma." Those are textbook indicators. Reid isn't dangerous to others. He's dangerous to himself. He needs psychiatric evaluation and intervention, not a terrorism charge. That's not your call to make, Officer Collins. No, it's yours. And I'm providing you with my professional assessment based on 11 years of law enforcement experience. What you do with that assessment is your decision. Williams studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. Let's talk about the evidence in the backpack. Reid made specific claims about Nexus Pharmaceuticals. Did you verify any of those claims? I didn't have time or resources to verify anything on a plane at 35,000 feet, Agent Williams. But I documented what Reid told me, photographed the backpack and timer, and preserved the chain of custody when I turned it over to you. Your forensic team can examine the contents and determine validity. But you believe his claims? Sarah chose her words carefully. I believe Marcus Reid believes his claims. Whether those beliefs are supported by evidence, that's investigative work. But 47 dead children is not something to dismiss without thorough examination. If even a fraction of Reid's allegations are true, you're looking at corporate manslaughter on a massive scale. Which is why the backpack has already been transferred to our white-collar crime division, Williams said. They'll go through everything systematically. If there's a case, they'll build it. Good. That's all Reid wanted, for someone to take Emma's death seriously. Emma, that was his daughter, 7 years old, died from cardiac complications related to a Nexus pharmaceutical drug. According to Reid, Nexus knew about the risks and released the drug anyway. Williams wrote something down, then looked up. You developed quite a rapport with Reid in a short time. That's the job. De-escalation requires empathy and connection. Or you're just naturally good at it. Sarah didn't respond to that. She was exhausted, emotionally drained from the intensity of the past few hours. All she wanted was to retrieve Max, get out of this airport, and try to salvage what was left of her vacation. I think we have everything we need for now, Williams said, closing his tablet. We'll contact you if we have follow-up questions. You'll need to remain available for potential testimony if this goes to trial. Understood. What happens to Marcus? He'll be processed, evaluated, and held pending arraignment. Given his mental state and the circumstances, I imagine his attorney will argue for psychiatric treatment rather than jail time. But that's up to the courts. And the other passengers? The ones who were traumatized? We're interviewing everyone. Several have already requested victim services counseling. This was a terrifying experience for them, even if the threat wasn't real. Sarah thought about Linda Morrison, crying in row 10, thinking about her boys. About the elderly couple in first class who'd clutched each other during the crisis. About all the people who'd believed they might die today. For what it's worth, Sarah said, I hope the courts show mercy to Marcus Reid. He's not a bad man. He's a broken man who made terrible decisions while drowning in grief. There's a difference. I'll note your opinion in my report. Williams escorted her through security checkpoints and back toward the main terminal. As they walked, Sarah's phone, which had been in airplane mode for hours, suddenly erupted with notifications. Texts from Nicole demanding to know why her flight was being held at the gate. Missed calls from her supervisor in Atlanta. A voicemail from the APD public information officer. Looks like the story's already breaking, Williams observed, seeing her screen. It always does. Sarah quickly texted Nicole. I'm fine. Long story. Meet you at baggage claim. They reached a junction where Williams would return to the secured area and Sarah would continue to baggage claim. But first, Agent Williams, the cargo area. My K9 partner was on that flight. Where would they have taken him? Animals are usually processed through the cargo terminal, separate building, but given the circumstances, they probably held him for security screening. Let me check. Williams made a quick call, then nodded. Yeah, they've got him in a holding area near customs. I'll take you there. Relief flooded through Sarah. Thank you. They changed direction, Williams leading her through a maze of corridors and security doors that only law enforcement could access. Finally, they reached a climate-controlled room marked Animal Holding, and there, in a spacious kennel at the far end, was Max. The Malinois was on his feet, pacing, alert, despite the lingering effects of the sedative. The moment Sarah entered the room, his head snapped toward her. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Max barked, once sharp and joyful, and Sarah was crossing the room, and a handler was opening the kennel, and suddenly 75 pounds of Belgian Malinois was in her arms, whining and wiggling and licking her face with desperate enthusiasm. "Hey, buddy," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Hey, I'm here! I'm sorry! I'm so sorry!" Max pressed against her, his whole body vibrating with relief and happiness. His nose worked overtime, processing her scent, detecting the stress chemicals her body had released during the crisis, the traces of fear and adrenaline that still clung to her. "He's been restless since they brought him in," the handler said, a young woman with a kind face. "Kept looking toward the terminal like he knew something was wrong." "He always knows," Sarah said, scratching behind Max's ears in the spot that made him melt. "We have that connection." Williams watched the reunion with something approaching awe. That's something else." 6 years of partnership," Sarah explained, still holding Max. "He's not just my work partner, he's family." "I can see that." Williams handed her a business card. "My direct line. Call me if you remember anything else about Reid, or if you need anything related to the investigation." "Thank you, Agent Williams, for everything. You did good work up there, Officer Collins. You probably saved lives today. That man was a suicide risk, and if he'd been handled differently, well, I've seen how those situations can escalate. You gave him dignity when he had nothing left. That matters." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Max leaned against her leg, grounding her, reminding her that she was here, now, safe. Williams left, and Sarah spent a few more minutes with the handler, collecting Max's travel documentation and gear. Then she clipped his leash, not the tactical one from work, but a simple nylon leash she used for off-duty time, and they made their way toward baggage claim. The walk through the airport was surreal. Max drew attention the way he always did, a beautiful, powerful dog moving with military precision. People gave them space, some smiling, others pointing him out to children. Sarah kept her hand on his head, needing the physical contact, the reassurance that they were together again. At baggage claim, Nicole was waiting, her face anxious. She was 2 years younger than Sarah, with the same green eyes but longer hair and a warmer, more open expression. When she saw Sarah emerge with Max, relief transformed into concern. "Sarah, what happened? They held the plane for 40 minutes, and then I saw FBI vehicles and—" She stopped, really looking at her sister. "You're involved, aren't you? You're in the middle of whatever happened." "Let's get the bags first," Sarah said. "Then I'll explain everything." They collected Sarah's luggage, one small suitcase that felt absurdly insignificant given what she'd just experienced, and made their way to Nicole's car. Max jumped into the back seat with practiced ease, settling immediately. Sarah climbed into the passenger seat and let her head fall back against the headrest. "Okay," Nicole said, starting the car. "Talk." Sarah told her everything. The announcement, Marcus Reid, the timer, Emma, the evidence, the FBI. All of it poured out in a rush of words that left her feeling hollowed out and somehow lighter. Nicole listened without interrupting, her hands tight on the steering wheel. When Sarah finished, There was a long silence. "So on your day off," Nicole finally said, "on your vacation, you talked down a potential suicide bomber and may have uncovered a massive pharmaceutical conspiracy. When you put it that way, it sounds dramatic." "Sarah, it is dramatic. It's—" Nicole shook her head. Only you would get on a plane for a relaxing vacation and end up being a hero." "I'm not a hero. I just did my job." "Your job is in Atlanta. This was you being who you are, someone who can't ignore people in pain, who has to help, who can't turn off being a cop even when you're supposed to be off duty." Sarah didn't argue, because Nicole was right. Being a cop wasn't what she did. It was who she was. The badge might come off, but the instinct to protect and serve ran deeper than any uniform. "So what happens now?" Nicole asked. "With Marcus? With the investigation?" "The FBI will handle the criminal case. If Marcus's evidence is legitimate, Nexus will face federal charges. If it's not, if he was wrong about the conspiracy, then he'll face consequences for what he did on that plane. Either way, I gave Agent Williams the journalist's contact information. Even if the federal case goes nowhere, Karen Mitchell can still break the story. And you trust that they'll follow through?" "I have to. I made Marcus a promise." Nicole glanced at her sister. "You really cared about him, about Emma. 47 children, Nicole. If he's right, 47 families went through what Marcus went through. How do you hear that and not care?" They drove in silence for a while, Miami's afternoon traffic surrounding them. Max dozed in the back seat, his breathing deep and even. The crisis was over, they were safe, but Sarah couldn't shake the image of Marcus's face when the FBI had taken him away, that mix of relief and resignation, knowing his crusade was over, but uncertain if it had meant anything. "You'll follow up, won't you?" Nicole said. "Even though it's not your case, not your jurisdiction, you'll make sure someone investigates Emma's death properly." "Yes, that's what I thought." Nicole smiled, fond and exasperated. "You can't help yourself. Would you want me to be different?" "No, you wouldn't be you if you were different. But Sarah," Nicole's voice softened, "you're allowed to rest sometimes. You're allowed to not carry the weight of the world." "I know. Do you? Because you've been carrying it since you were 22 years old, and I've watched it wear you down year after year. You give everything to the job, to Max, to everyone who needs you. What do you keep for yourself?" Sarah looked out the window, watching Miami slide past. "This is what I keep, the knowledge that I make a difference, that because I was on that plane, Marcus Reid didn't die today, that because I listened instead of just restrained, a grieving father has a chance at healing, that because I preserved the evidence, Emma's story might actually be told. That's what I keep, Nicole. Purpose. Purpose isn't enough to sustain a person, Sarah. Maybe not, but it's what I have." Nicole didn't push further. They'd had versions of this conversation before, Nicole advocating for Sarah to date, to have hobbies, to build a life beyond the badge. Sarah explaining that her life was complete as it was. They never convinced each other, but they understood each other, and that was enough. Nicole's apartment was in Coral Gables, a cheerful space filled with plants and color, the opposite of Sarah's sparse, functional Atlanta apartment. Max immediately claimed a spot on the cool tile floor near the balcony door, settling with a contented sigh. "You should rest," Nicole said. "You look exhausted." "I am. But first—" Sarah pulled out her phone. She had calls to make, follow-ups to ensure. The journalist in Boston, the Miami Herald investigator, her own supervisor to report what had happened. But before any of that, she pulled up her email and typed a message to Agent Williams. "Agent Williams, please ensure that Marcus Reid receives psychiatric evaluation and appropriate mental health support while in custody. He is a suicide risk and needs intervention, not just incarceration. Also requesting updates on the Nexus Pharmaceutical's evidence analysis. I am available to testify if the investigation moves forward. Officer Sarah Collins, APD K9 Unit." She hit send, then sat back. It wasn't much, but it was something, a continuation of the promise she'd made at 35,000 feet. Her phone rang. the APD Public Information Officer. "Collins, we're getting media requests about the incident on your flight. FBI confirmed you were involved in resolving the situation. We need to coordinate on messaging." "No interviews," Sarah said immediately. "This isn't about me. If anyone asks, say I was simply doing what any law enforcement officer would do. The story's going to break regardless. Then let it break. But keep my name out of it as much as possible. The focus should be on the investigative outcome, not the plane incident." "Understood. Though you should know, the captain of your flight specifically mentioned you in his report to the airline, called you exemplary. Captain Reynolds is generous. He's accurate. You did good work, Collins. The chief wanted me to tell you that personally." After the call ended, Sarah finally allowed herself to truly relax. She showered, washing away the stress and fear of the day, then changed into comfortable clothes. When she emerged, Nicole had prepared dinner. Something simple but delicious that reminded Sarah she hadn't eaten since the terrible airplane coffee. They ate on the balcony as the sun set over Miami, turning the sky brilliant shades of orange and pink. Max joined them, resting his head on Sarah's knee, accepting small pieces of chicken Nicole snuck him. 2 days, Nicole said. "We still have 2 days before you fly back to Atlanta. Think you can actually relax now?" Sarah smiled. "I can try. That's all I ask. Beach tomorrow, just you, me, Max, and umbrella drinks? Sounds perfect." That night Sarah lay in Nicole's guest room, Max curled at the foot of the bed as he always did. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the day's events, Marcus's devastated face, Emma's story, the 47 other children, the timer counting down the seconds since a little girl's heart had stopped. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it. "Officer Collins, this is Karen Mitchell, the journalist Marcus mentioned. Agent Williams contacted me about the evidence. I wanted to thank you for believing Marcus, for protecting what he worked so hard to compile, for seeing him as a father instead of a threat. Whatever happens with the investigation, you gave Emma's story a chance. That means everything. I'll keep you updated on our progress." Sarah typed back, "Please do. And Karen, make it count. Make sure those 47 children's names are heard. I promise, we'll make it count." Sarah set the phone aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would go to the beach. She would swim in the ocean and feel the sand between her toes. She would laugh with Nicole and play with Max and try to be just Sarah instead of Officer Collins. But tonight, she was exactly who she was meant to be. A cop who'd chosen empathy over force. A woman who'd listened instead of just acted. A person who'd seen another person's pain and refused to look away. At 35,000 feet with no way out, she'd found a way through. And that, Sarah thought as sleep finally claimed her, was the job. Not just solving crimes or making arrests, but finding ways through impossible situations, connecting with people at their worst moments, offering hope when everything seemed hopeless. That was what made it worthwhile, what made the long hours and constant danger and personal sacrifices mean something. Max shifted at her feet, his paw twitching in a dream. Probably running through fields, chasing suspects, doing what he was born to do. "Sweet dreams, partner," Sarah whispered. "We did good today." And for the first time in weeks, Sarah Collins slept deeply and peacefully, her heart light with the knowledge that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, being exactly who you were in exactly the moment you were needed was enough to change everything. Wheels down, hearts up, mission complete. The end